Welcome, Womanjika, kia ora, aya, bienvenida, everyone. It is so lovely for all of you to join us live here today on Butter in partnership with Discourse for our event, How to Measure the ROI of Community. Now I just want to first start by saying I am blown away. We've had over 150 people sign up for this event, which is incredible. We've got a lot of people joining here live today and a lot of people who will catch up in the future on the recording. Howdy. And also we're super excited for all of you to learn from Hawk, Selva, and Jess. So we will introduce you to them very, very, very soon. And yes, a round of applause for our speakers. I love that from you all. And of course, if I haven't had the pleasure of connecting with you, my name is Paz Bazarski, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Community Collective. And we serve businesses to build the most impactful communities of our time. I'd love to see a reaction. Has anyone ever heard of the Community Collective before? Feel free to go into Butter, add a reaction if you've heard of us. Well, if you haven't, this might be your first event for the CC. We serve people to build communities through our cohort programs, recruitment, and coaching. And we also have a ritual here at the Community Collective for any live event that we run. We start with an acknowledgement of country. And so this is a way for us to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. And so I'm here tuning in from Torquay along the Surf Coast in regional Victoria. And I would like to acknowledge the land of the Wadawurrung people and pay my respects to them as the traditional owners. Some of the first community builders of this country, if you will. And I'd love to extend that respect to wherever you are tuning in from today. We have got a link in the chat. You can actually find the traditional owners of the land, bit of a hot homework if you want to do that afterwards, but feel free to also post in where you are tuning in from. We've got Brad coming in from Karuna land, Liz, so good to see Liz from Boonwurrung country. Katie, one of our cohort alum. It's beautiful to have you all here. And we also have Jem, our operations lead from the Community Collective here in the chat. She's our tech master looking after everything in Butter. And of course, if this is your first time on Butter, let's have a raise of a physical human hand. If you're here for the first time on Butter, we've got, a couple people, high five to you. So Butter is a tech tool of one of our previous cohort speakers. It was founded in 2020 to have more engaging sessions. And if this is your first time, you find all your settings on the top left. You can all go into the reactions. This is my favorite pick, and pick your favorite reaction. Mine is number 7. It's like a big thinking emoji. So yeah, feel free to pick yours. Fabulous. And this is a panel discussion. So if you do want to have a question in Q&A, you can click I have a question. We'll give you the mic and you can get up on stage. Or of course, you found the chat and you can post questions in there. All right, so let's talk about the purpose of today. I want to set the scene. We're all here to learn and collectively understand more about how to measure the ROI, which stands for return on investment of community. So we really want to help you identify how to actually calculate the value of your role as either a community builder, an operator, or a founder, and also to understand how to quantify and communicate the value of your community. Perhaps you need to say to your stakeholders or your boss or your team members or your members and really understand how you actually measure the impact of what you're doing. Because building a community can be extremely tough, lonely, exhausting, and confusing. And we are here just to make your lives just that little bit easier by adding some clarity on all things measurements, metrics, and ROI. So today also wouldn't have been made possible without our fabulous friends and partner over at Discourse. And so if this is also your first time hearing about Discourse, let's add a reaction. Feel free to pick your emoji of choice if this is your first time hearing about Discourse. But they are the online home for your community. So they make it easy to have meaningful conversations and to collaborate. They were actually founded in 2013. They had 3 co-founders, super passionate about online discussion. And today they have some incredible brands hosted on Discourse, including Atlassian, Samsung, even Asana is hosted on Discourse. And they're a completely remote team. They've just cracked 100 people across 25 countries and 14 time zones. I don't even know how they schedule a meeting. But hot fun fact, they have an amazing tech tool that they use for team coordination. You guessed it, it's Discourse. So if you would like to learn more about them, obviously you can check out any of the, of course, round of applause for them, link in the chat. And yeah, we've got Hawk here repping the Discourse team, and I just want to say thanks to May as well. And so how today is going to work, we're going to dive straight in with a check-in. This is a ritual we have at the Community Collective to basically ensure that we connect live before diving into any content. And as well, we're then going to dive straight into our panel discussion. You'll get to learn more about Hawk, Selva, and Jess. And as well, we'll have time for audience Q&A. So jump in, post your questions during the discussion, any comments, vibes, thoughts, supportive jokes, whatever you're feeling. And then we'll wrap up with our thank yous and community announcements. And we have a special gift that we want to share with all of you at the end of today if you hang around to that time. And we're also going to give away a prize today. So if you take a photo, either a screenshot or with your phone of this event, and you post it on social media and tag the Community Collective and Discourse on socials, we'll reach out to you and share our free tech tool directory, which is a collection of hundreds of incredible tech tools to learn about community building. So if you want to live up and bag the prize, feel free to tag both of our companies on socials. And to help you do that, we always start with a bit of a group photo, which is always a bit of fun to actually see who is joining this event live. So if you'd like to be in this group photo now, feel free to turn your cameras on. You can stay incognito if that's more your vibe. And I'm going to ask Jess, would you mind giving us a bit of a hand gesture, and we'll all copy you in this?
Fab, thanks, Paz. I would love to see a group virtual high five, but with those hands nice and close to the camera. So if you find a little space, squeeze in the corner.
Alrighty, 3, 2, 1. So many high fives from Venia. I love it. Oh, fabulous. There's 2 pages of people. One more high five from this one. We've got Diana, Ines. Oh, there's Liz. Andre's here. Oh, fabulous. Oh, Bianna's tuning in down the road. Absolutely. How divine to see you all. All right. Thanks for that, Jess. We'll share the group photos afterwards. And now it's time to check in. So let's get a bit of a check-in, bit of a read of the room. We want to start off by asking you a question, which is, you can stamp this key here. And so we'd like to ask you, how confident are you in measuring the ROI of community? Far left is low confidence. Far right is high confidence. And of course, feel free to understand which side of the spectrum you're on. And if anyone also, let's have a look at the read of the room. We've got a lot of people on the low confidence section. And as well, we've got a lot of people around this kind of in between low and medium. So we've got a lot of people on this, kind of in between low and medium confidence, and a couple of people at this high confidence. Okay, love that, love that. A lot of our speakers are on that side. That's a good sign. That's a great sign. And we've got a couple of people around this medium element, which is totally fair. You know, obviously trying to calculate that ROI can be a bit confusing. So all of you are in the right place, and hopefully by the end of today, our aim is to make sure that we kind of move you through to the right side of that spectrum to make sure that you can gain in confidence as well and take away some key insights. All right. Thank you so much for engaging with our check-in. I now have the absolute pleasure of introducing you to many of our speakers for today. And so basically, if you haven't had the pleasure of connecting with Hawk is the co-CEO of Discourse, based in Auckland, New Zealand, and is also a community expert with over 20 years of experience, which I'm always so blown away about. Shh, don't tell anyone. We won't tell anyone. But she began working as a software developer, actually, and then this was really where Hawk's interest for the tech community sparked, and has really kind of led to this career change, being deep in the community space, held roles at SitePoint Network, head of community at Feverbee, been a community consultant, also was a cohort #1 speaker, which is fabulous. And the first time Hawk and I met was not in Australia or New Zealand. It was on the other side of the world in San Francisco. So how about that? So Hawk, is really beautiful to have you here today. Thank you for being here. And as well, our second panelist, we have Selva, who has been building engaging community since 2003. And has previously built a lot of online, in real life kind of communities for a lot of different companies, whether that's been MYOB or Cora, and also been a community consultant, and also based in Auckland, New Zealand, and also is currently working at the Auckland Council and is an ambassador of the Community Collective. So let's give it up for Selva. Lots of emojis and reactions. Great to have you here. And lucky last, we've got Jess, who has worked as a community manager since 2008. Got a running tally here. We should see how long that goes for. But it's also focused on building brand communities in the tech industry. Currently at Asana. Add a reaction if you've heard of this great productivity tech tool. But she manages the Asana Together Ambassador Program, and I hear that there are over 22,000 ambassadors at Asana, which is just mind-blowing. And she also runs all of their training programs for Asana's biggest fans. But before that, also led Microsoft's retail community and also established Virgin Australia's social media monitoring program and Microsoft's European HQ. She's based in Sydney and is just an absolute legend. And so, it's so great to have you all here. Now that we know who we're talking to, I want to just set the scene for a little bit and frame what we're talking about around ROI. Because for a lot of people here, this is your first time kind of diving into this world. ROI stands for return on investment and is a metric commonly used by businesses to either assess the success of a project or a community based on the financial returns it's generated. So according to the Harvard Business School online, ROI is honestly a metric that used to calculate how much profit has been generated from a specific investment. And so today we really want to speak about how do you calculate ROI for something so intangible such as community, but also what other metrics do we really need to pair ROI with to also really demonstrate that value? If it's not just the financial return, what else can we really look at? So Hawk, with all of that in mind, I'd love to kind of dive straight in because we frequently hear from so many people that it's really hard to measure community ROI. So can you help us understand why establishing metrics is really important for businesses and what kind of broader role the business goals play in selecting any of those kind of metrics?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me? I'm off mute.
Yes, you sound great.
As you say, it is incredibly hard to measure community ROI. It's broadly misunderstood as a concept. And even when it is understood and it's approached intentionally, it's often really difficult to access the right data. It's even more difficult to directly attribute the changes in those data trends to your community. But I think on the flip side, we also frequently hear about community programs closing down, teams losing headcount, all of those sorts of horrible, scary things. And I think the reason is almost certainly because the community champions didn't build a strong enough business case for whatever reason, not necessarily their fault. We'll dig into why that can be difficult later. But we all know that business leaders and stakeholders do have to prioritize their resource allocation, and they do that based on clearly communicated value propositions. So if other business groups can clearly communicate the value of their programs and you can't, why is the business going to continue to prioritize the community, sadly? If I was having to make difficult decisions about where to cut funding, I'd certainly be targeting parts of the business that weren't able to demonstrate that clear value. So obviously building your business case and supporting it with demonstrated proof that the community is either reducing business costs or somehow producing revenue that exceeds the costs that it runs, that it requires to run, really is the key to ensuring the longevity of your program. So having a really clear picture of the specific value proposition that your community is also going to help you strategize and prioritize how you use your time and your resources. For instance, the purpose of your community is words are pouring out of me, is to support customer acquisition. You're going to need to invest resources to ensure that there's really high quality content that ranks well in your search engines, for example. So having those metrics, understanding what the quality and the value of your community is going to help you choose those metrics, and it's going to help you build that business case that's going to ensure that your organization is going to continue giving you the funding that you need.
Yeah, and I love that distinction that you've made around if you're in a large organization and there are other departments that can clearly explain how their projects and initiatives are contributing to the direction of the company, the goals of that company. But then over here, if we're in community and we can't articulate that at the same strength, that plays into so many different dynamics. Have you seen that dynamic play out at all?
Yeah, it's happening. I mean, it's happening more and more. Back in the glory days, we didn't have to prove the value of community. Everyone just knew it. Those intangible benefits and all of the fluffy niceness, the brand advocacy, that just went without saying. But now, the community has matured to a point where it is part of a business now. And in the same way that every other part of the business has to justify its existence, so do we. So it's a sad truth, but it's just the maturing. It's a sign of our maturity. So there's benefits to it as well, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And we're also seeing businesses where community is the product. We have SaaS companies, software as a service. We have CaaS companies, community as a service. And so for a lot of founders here as well, who might be building community-led businesses where community is integral for the company, this is even more important to really understand that. So I love those points, Hawk and Selva. I might come over to you to kind of continue diving into why it's hard to measure and can you kind of understand and help us articulate what are some of the common challenges that community builders, operators, or founders, might even have when trying to measure the kind of ROI of community?
Yeah, thanks, Paz. Just adding to what Hawk said, like community is like vast in terms of like different directions in which companies want to build. So firstly, it's important to understand that most of the effort someone puts into building a thriving community might not have a direct measurable ROI. And that doesn't mean that it's not actually bringing back revenue or like profit to the business. So it's important to align the community goals with the business goals, so that one can actually look at measuring some of the tangible benefits and the metrics to determine a return on investment. So the key here is not to define as a direct indication of measurable ROI from every step or action taken to build that community. Having said that, I also think that the following pointers are some of the common challenges that community builders are facing today. So the first is basically trying to align the community goal with the business goals. Not a lot of people understand that. So it's important to get that through. And then defining the success metrics, one for the business and then for the community, and then see what is synchronizing with each other. And then the third is to collect the relevant data. We are all over numbers. Like we have like 1,000 different data and metrics to measure. So we need to define and determine what needs to be there. And then defining the values of what it means to the community, because there are several different types of community, like acquisition, customer research, support, etc. And then finally, accrediting and attributing the measured values to identify the impact that it creates. This all will help in contributing and telling the story to the stakeholders. And because a lot of these steps are missing, several community builders, founders are like trying to get that opportunity to provide that sort of like value of why measuring ROI, or like how to measure ROI for their business, etc. So finally, also understanding that community building is a long-term exercise. It's like running a marathon and not running a sprint, and not just looking at the short-term goals, but looking at the long-term goals of what you want to build, and establishing that human connection.
Yeah, but Selva, I'm so bad at running marathons. I'm so not a runner. I'm not that fit, but we do.
It's a metaphor.
Yeah, thank God. Thank God. I do have the dedication to run a community for a long time, so yeah. I can run that marathon. But yeah, I love your points there, Selva. It can be also so hard to even understand what the rest of the business or the rest of the Melbournes deem valuable as well, because obviously what I'm hearing from that, there's two sides. Obviously, we have to understand what the company will value from that perspective, but also the members from that side of things. And, I guess going to the company side of things with you, Jess, from, I guess, the perspective of a business, why would business leaders or the C-suites or directors, I guess, really want to aim to be able to quantify the community efforts and really see that from the rest of their team?
Yeah, I think Hawk's made some great points about value and visibility, and Selva on aligning to business goals and impact, fundamental. But if I step into the shoes of business leaders, I'm sure everyone on this call has encountered, senior leaders and managers who love community. They 100% get it. They see it and it's part of the DNA of their organization. But equally, you might have encountered leaders who are skeptical. They're a bit resistant. They don't quite see the value and they're asking a lot of questions. And I think at a very simplistic level, many business leaders view functions like community, not only community, but many others, as either a cost center or a potential amplifier of business impact and value. And if you think of that on a continuum, different stakeholders are going to view you in a different way. And I think it's really important that we as community builders and managers try and focus more on that amplification of business impact and business value. So we're less seen as a cost center and more seen as like a core contributor to what is critical to the organization.
Yes, that core contributor, that is such a great point to really understand that this, the effort that we have as community builders or operators within companies to build community is really making sure that we're a core contributor to what the rest of the team is also trying to achieve. And I think, what Hawk, you pointed out is times are changing. We're in a really different kind of context. Maybe 10 years ago, we had a lot more freedom and resources and funding and a lot more buy-in. But definitely as things have gotten tighter, more scrutiny for a lot of companies and employees, we definitely, I think it's more important than ever to really understand that. And so I'm hearing a lot of, we've got those kind of challenges. There's clear elements of finding the value, understanding how a community can really address the kind of core company goals. Hawk, could we kind of get a bit granular, make this a bit practical? Let's say we've got people on this call here who now need to select some metrics. So they go, okay, I'm ready to select some metrics. What kind of processes do you follow to kind of select the most important metrics? And do you have any advice for people here who might be trying to go through that process right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all three of us have referenced that number one part of the puzzle, which is tying your community value proposition to your very specific business goal. So you need to understand what that is out of the gate. You've got to properly align that with your stakeholders so that everyone knows exactly what it is that you're aiming for. And if you don't know what that objective is, that's where you start. Noel Flowers has a really good exercise that you can use. It's called the Relentless Why, and you just go through a series of asking yourself questions until you uncover that underlying value prop. Once you've got that, there's your starting point, right? So it's a measurable business outcome. Maybe it's customer retention. Until you land there, you cannot start selecting your metrics, because what metrics do you need to tell that story? So we start there, then we can move on to metrics. So we look at an example. Maybe it's a brand community that's designed to boost lead conversion, or maybe it's a DevRel community and the goal is reducing hiring costs. Both of those are going to have very different success indicators. Other communities exist to reduce support costs, to increase customer lifetime value, boost lead generation. There's lots and lots and lots of different use cases, and they all require very different sets of metrics. If we use the customer retention example, you'll need to gather data that allows you to use cohort analysis to compare your churn percentages between customers that are community members and customers that aren't. Again, it's that attribution piece that's quite difficult. If you were, for example, going to do CSAT surveys on your community members and go, well, look, all these community members are so happy, they love the community and the brand so much. Well, that's flawed, and you can't necessarily attribute that data because they're part of your community because they already like your brand, right? So you need to be able to ensure that whatever you're measuring, you also have historical data so that you can compare. Then you need to sit down with your stakeholders. You've established that value proposition. You're aligned on what you need. Then you collect your data. In large organizations, I try and identify an ally that can help you pick what those metrics look like and to collect and analyze them. Smaller organizations, you might need to do it yourself. There are lots of examples online of the types of metrics that you can select based on what your community goal is. Fever-Bee, actually, I think Jem was going to drop some resources into the chat. And one is I'd check out Noel Flowers' Relentless Why if you don't have that number one piece of the puzzle. Secondly, I'd check Rich Millington's ROI guide. Well, if you do have that piece of the puzzle, it's then going to give you some example metrics to collect. But also bear in mind that you're not going to be able to find all the metrics necessarily that you need all of the time. So sometimes creating a roadmap to start to collect data so that you can watch for your trends over time is going to be that long game. But I think the other two things that people often forget is that ROI is an equation, right? And the attributable value is only one very small part of it. Well, half of it probably, because you also need to define metrics that are going to demonstrate ongoing success, but you need to be able to calculate the actual cost of running the community so you know what the return on the investment is. And then there's a third piece of the puzzle, which is usually known as the hurdle rate, and that's the minimum return that the business expects for investing in the community. So there's your three sets of metrics. what it costs to run, what your hurdle rate looks like, and then the metrics that are going to support the value of the business goal. Then you do your maths.
Yeah, we get some maths going. I love that. I love that. And, you make a really good point there, Hawk, around that kind of gathering of historical data. If you're going to select metrics and then also determine, what is the retention rate that you're looking for? What percentage of ROI are you aiming for? Can we just double down on the historical data? What if we had founders or operators here who were building community from scratch and they didn't have the historical data to kind of work from to then select those metrics? Do you have any advice around, I guess, where to start from when you don't have the history?
Are you still asking me?
Yes, Hawk, that would be fab to go through.
Yeah. I think that in some ways you're in a bit of a privileged situation if that's the case, because you're all starting from scratch. You can design what that framework of metrics looks like. You can decide what you do need to collect. It's much more difficult to walk into an existing community and try and unravel this by reverse engineering it. I can see everyone else nodding. It's an absolute nightmare. So if you don't have data, that's fine. The assumption is that you're sitting down talking to the stakeholders, you're aligned on what the purpose is and what you need to collect, and so you can start from scratch and build that up over time. There's less of an onus on you as a community manager to justify yourself in that situation, because obviously your stakeholders are sitting down with you going, hey, we want a community for this reason. So I think that if that's where you're sitting and you don't have that historical data, you're in still a hell of a lot better position than somebody that's walked into a behemoth of an organization and has lots of data but doesn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Oh, how privileged. I love that. Clean slate for a lot of people.
Well, anyone that wants a new community, that's magic. It's much easier than inheriting one.
Yeah. Are we saying we've got buy-in from a leader to build a new community right now? God, how lucky is that? No, I love that. And, obviously selecting the metrics, I really hear that kind of collaborative process from as well, what you're saying as well. Involve the stakeholders, involve some of the members, understand what that looks like. If you're going to select metrics, you can have the first stab, but then get some feedback and make that a really co-creation type process. So yeah, thanks for that, Hawk. I might, Selva, let's talk about, I guess, the intangible, because on one side we have a lot of things that we can quantify, but outside of numerical metrics, do you have any ideas about how else we can really communicate that intangible value of community? A lot of people say it's so hard to measure the feeling or the vibe or the connections that people make. What do we do on the intangible side?
Yeah, true. Thanks, Paz. I love this question, actually. The online answer I would want to give is community is like a gold mine. The more you explore and dig it, the more you get. But again, gold is limited resource, so not a ideal metaphor for this, but you get a point, right? So some of the pointers that I would want to say here is the community sentiment. That provides some great insights into what the customers are liking and disliking about your product or service that you're offering. So product managers can directly actually get insights from the community to improve their product. Research and knowledge. The kind of like the wealth and knowledge the community members bring to your table is like something that's impossible only with your employee resources. So kind of like you get a lot of information about like what the customers want or like what you need to be, developing. Advocacy. Some of these members that advertise your products and market your product to other members is like invaluable. Like you're saving a huge cost on like marketing and advertising, which you can't directly measure, but you're going to acquire a lot of more new people into the product or the community, right? Search engine optimization in terms of like content based community and communities where people come and write answers, they're going to be like fresh, new perspective. And that's going to actually help you rank higher when somebody is actually searching on related products or services. So that's something that you directly can't measure, but it's a great benefit that you are going to have from the community. And directly also in terms of some support communities, the call deflections the support community makes is huge. Some communities do measure in terms of like the number of views on the answers and how many people would have actually otherwise picked their phone and contacted your contact center. And that's like huge cost savings in terms of like money directly spent on hiring these resources, and two, directly your community members contributing and providing answers that you don't want to provide. Bug identification. community members discover that like much sooner than product managers, honestly speaking, because product managers are generally like build the product, ship it. Community managers are someone who is generally wanting to make sure that the community has the interaction, but community members explore each and every aspect and come back to you, hey, this is not working, can you just rectify this to me, etc. And finally, social support. I think I've generally figured out that the long-term community members reach out to each other. In some cases, they have their own groups, other than the community, where they interact with each other. They offer support in real life as well, which is generally something that we don't measure. So yeah, to summarize, community is a great place for company to communicate with their customers directly, and how cool is that? And above all, again, I come back to the human connections that's being made in the platform. That's invaluable for me.
Yeah, those human connections. I mean, that's what it's all about. If a community is a group of people who are connected by a shared sense of purpose, who support each other on a regular basis, the human connections are the glue within that. And you're so right, Selva, there's advocacy and so many other ways to kind of explain how valuable these groups can be. To give an example, at the Community Collective, we write a good, bad, ugly update for our advisors each month, and we'll share how we're tracking on our 9 metrics. And then I'll also share the good, bad, ugly. But then I'll also just share some of the transformational stories or testimonials or quotes that I've heard, that kind of intangible element. A great community builder called Millie Tamati, Add a Reaction. If you've heard of her before, she's a fabulous person over in Scotland, the co-founder of Generalist World. And she measures how many transformational stories she can track as a result of members being involved in their community. And so, for example, if someone landed a job, or they got hired, or they've signed a new partnership with someone, that might not be calculating the direct retention rate of our members. But if someone feels a little bit less lonely and more confident in their life because of our spaces, trying to capture that value is so tough, but can really be written in beautiful words and stories and photos in other ways as well. So we love the data, and then add some paint and color to paint the full picture. But Jess, if you want to jump in on any of those metrics or intangible value, feel free to riff off that as well if you want to build on anything. And then as well, I'd love to dive into tech tools. Obviously we've kind of spoken about the challenges, selecting metrics, that intangible value. What about the practical side of tech tools? Have you found anything effective for actually tracking, reporting, gathering historical data to kind of dive into those metrics?
Yeah, I feel like I'm yin to the yang of Selva's section, because I'd love to share some really tangible things we do. But a little bit of background on the Asana community to start, because I think that'll help paint a picture. Our community is really established. We've actually now got close to 30,000 ambassadors. So the growth has been incredible, like creeping up. And our forum is, of course, hosted on Discourse, and it has, I think, close to 750,000 profiles. So we have a very large base, which also means we have a lot of data touch points and a lot of analysis and a lot of insight that has to take place, because our community covers different programs, from in-person events, virtual events and webinars. We have a newsletter. Of course, we have the forum. We even offer a swag store for our ambassadors to come in and purchase items to gift to their colleagues as they start using Asana. We have a Slack channel, a resource library. So you can imagine kind of the scale and the volume that we're operating at. And as a result, we need tech tools that are really robust to help us with that volume. But very broadly, I would split our metrics into 2 key buckets. We have business impact metrics, which are really, really crucial. And we then have community health signals, which are also crucial. And they're kind of our lead and our lag indicators. For our community health metrics, we use a tool called Common Room, if you're familiar with that. Common Room is a wonderful aggregator where it brings across all of the insights into one place from our community touchpoints. And that gives us a really good snapshot of health. We can see when one of our ambassadors has been to a bunch of our training, they've posted on the forum, they've completed some online courses, and we can recognize both at an individual level, but then also at a macro level, what's happening there. So that's our health metric that sits with Common Room. But then we also, business impact metrics are critical, absolutely critical. And so we make sure that not all of these metrics, but just the most crucial ones also feed into the tooling and systems that are used across the business more widely. So internally, we use Asana, we use Salesforce CRM products, we use Tableau, and we make sure that those really critical business impact metrics from our ambassadors and from our community flow through so that other teams can see and recognize the impact that happens when there is an ambassador in an account, in a geography, in a particular city.
Yeah. And those two buckets, you've just clearly articulated that community sits across two key areas, which is the business impact and the community health on the member side. So yeah, thanks for sharing those tangible elements. I can't believe Asana hit 30,000 ambassadors. I mean,
nearly. Little bit early, but rounding up.
All right, we'll sign up everyone here and we'll tick it over. No, but I love that, Jess. And obviously there's so many different things that people can measure, but clearly defining it into those two subsections can be such a great way to start. And we've got a couple minutes left and we've got some questions coming in, so I might ask another couple questions for all of you, and then if anyone live has some questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, or if you look at Brad, love that, or if you want to jump in the queue and say I have a question, we'll get a line going and we'll try and go between the two to answer as many as possible. And just make your questions really clear with any context so we can best answer them as well. But first, Hawk, if we're talking about, speaking to the rest of our team who might not understand the value of community, we've kind of tried to communicate this value. We've gone through the process. Do you have any tips about how we could really communicate to those people who might not be very familiar with Community Manager or just a bit apprehensive and don't really know much about it?
Yeah, for sure. I think you've got to read the room. You've got to pitch the right story to the right audience. I think ultimately many community builders fail because they don't do that. They open with very community specific stories that if the executives are your audience in this case, they just don't understand those community engagement metrics in themselves aren't worth anything to those people. But if you can directly attribute them to something like churn reduction, then suddenly you're going to get people listening. So you do need to have a very clear story to tell about how the community is directly supporting the business or whoever it is that you're speaking with. And that story might be the community allows us to communicate more efficiently and has improved the speed of product development by 30%. That's going to appeal very much to a specific group of people. But telling them about the interactions within the community and how, there's all this communication building and networking happening internally just probably doesn't mean much to them. So you need to make sure that you're telling your story with conviction and that you've tailored it to the appropriate audience. And I think that you also need to work quite hard to build up a support network of allies within your organization and tell your story to appeal to those stakeholders and those allies. Community really needs to be baked into the organization at all levels, or you are going to have those naysayers that kind of sit on the edges and at the end of the day make your job a whole lot harder. So yeah, I think number one piece of advice would be read the room, and number two would be tell a story that appeals to the group that's listening.
Yeah. And ask questions around to these people of what do you value as important to really understand that. Because I think, we've got to understand the naysayers and bring them on board. So I think that's a really great practical advice to kind of share. And, that kind of ties into this element of feedback. We're trying to read the room, ask right questions, and then obviously share our perspectives and then dive into feedback. Selva, if I was going to come to you with this question around, how can feedback be used to make sure that we're not only refining metrics, but improving them to make sure that we are calculating the ROI of community and also just quantifying that value?
Yeah, sure. I think like Jess mentioned earlier in one of her answers, there are like two different metrics we're trying to measure and we're trying to marry them together here, and feedback plays that important aspect in getting that information across. So I also would want to refer to one of my previous answers of intangible benefits, where we get this insights from the members into understanding what they want, understanding what they value, etc. So I would like to refer to some of the examples that I have from some of my interactions with the community, I love to actually set up one-on-one conversations with most of my community members to understand. And in one of the community that I was building, I tried to figure out a couple of inactive members who used to be active long ago. And when I had the conversation, that actually provoked me to understand that they were, after a certain point, they were only able to read the questions that already had answers in it. And the topics that was displayed to them were like irrelevant and kind of like not their area of expertise, etc. So without having that conversation, we wouldn't have identified that we need to go back and then check our algorithm in a way to make sure that they get relevant topics being shown to them, and list of unanswered questions being shown to them so that they start to contribute. And after making the change, we saw that the number of answers written by those specific community members shot up. So they were able to write 10% more answers than what they were able to write before the conversation. So kind of like that provoked a lot of other insights too. I would definitely want to say that having that conversation with community members can always point you into directions that you otherwise would not be knowing or noticing. And another benefit that I also think that community members' feedback actually brought us in terms of like understanding the UX that we had, and what we as community managers think that some of the important features for the community members potentially was something that is disturbing their view towards whatever is happening in the community, and they found it like something that's not being helpful or useful. So having that conversation helped us to redesign the UX to make sure that they feel welcomed and they feel comfortable in using the product that we have with them. So yeah, the summary that I want to share here is that having this sort of like feedback from community allows in marrying up some of the external needs the community have with some of the internal opportunities that we have that we wouldn't have identified otherwise.
Yeah, and I love that element of understanding how to get feedback from members, but then also your team. A habit that we've built at the Community Collective is around, okay, well, every checkpoint, either mid-program and at the end of the program, we ask this set of questions to gather feedback in written form, but then we also offer one-on-one calls at the end of every program as a wrap-up to gather verbal feedback. And building in these processes within your communities and your roles, I think can help make that process that you articulated, Silva, so much easier of, great, just let's put it in our general processes that happen here regularly. Okay, time is flying by. Questions are rolling in. I think we're going to quickly jump into some actual Q&As from our fabulous members here. And so members, what we're going to do is we're going to basically go to some of the questions in the chat. And as well, all of you, no one's brave enough to go, I have a question yet, but that's there if you want to ask live. So I'm going to dive straight into these audience Q&A just to make sure we get as many questions done as possible. And the question that we're going to start with is from Deepak, which is, how do you decide the budget for community activities? So if we're talking about budget and calculating how much should we spend on community activities, I might throw Jess, if you want to kind of jump in around thinking about budget, and then Hawk, if you want to add anything after that as well.
Sure, I think that's a great question. Thank you. In my case, the budget kind of gets set by our HQ team. So I know at the beginning of the year or the beginning of a 6-month period how much I have to play with. Unfortunately, because I'm in an established community, I've got benchmarking insights from previous years. And I have a rough estimate of how many events we can run within a certain amount of budget, or if we're needing to invest in new tech tooling. I have some of those insights, but I really love having a pilot mentality of, I will always, every single year, every single planning cycle, look at new initiatives that I want to pilot and set some budget aside for those. Especially initiatives that are collaborative. I loved Hawk's mention of allyship. And if you've got initiatives you want to work with other teams, so your community work has that expanded impact so that you're not seen as, you know, potentially the cost center, that you're seen as a business amplifier. I think those are smart investments for you to make as a pilot. So that's the mentality I use. I use a combination of benchmarking and a concerted pilot approach to test out new things.
Yeah, love that. Love that. What about you, Hawk?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I think what you said there was bang on. I guess what I would add is that it's just like any ROI question. It's a difficult one to answer because we don't know the intricacies of your community. We don't know what it's intended to solve for the business. We don't know how big the business is. We don't know how mature your community is. So there's no such thing as a number I can pull out of thin air is the appropriate way to say that. But I do think that in the same way that you should start by collecting metrics in a room of people, you should start having budget discussions with the people that hold the purse strings. Essentially, it's the same as with any business group. If somebody from another part of the business comes to me asking for budget for a new project, I ask them to justify it, and I would expect the same from you. So I think start by sitting down, justifying what you need the money for, and then work together with your stakeholders to establish what's available and what's reasonable. And then, then you can benchmark off that for future years.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. And, you know, from a founder perspective as well, for any founders here who are determining the budgets themselves, a process that I go through is I'll do a financial forecast for the year and look at, okay, what is the projected revenue of the business for this year? How much do we need to save away for expenses? And then basically look at what we're going to be spending in that year, and then basically build out budgets from that. So kind of project and then work backwards from there if you're doing it from scratch as well. And, you know, we've got so many fabulous questions. I love them. We actually got 151 questions in the RSVP registration. So we're not going to ask all of them all at once. But what I'd love to dive into is this question from Venia, which is, do you happen to have any screenshots or dashboards and reports that you use? So what are the differences between boards and reports? So Venia, I think this question is really around, you know, one, what kind of tech tools are we using? And what is the difference between using boards and reports when actually looking at data? And so, I mean, Selva, do you want to jump in on this one? Do you want to handball it to someone else? What are you thinking?
Sure, I'll take a dig at it, and others can also add on. Generally dashboards are helpful for community managers to go and look and play around what sort of metrics they want to focus and look at. And then reports are generally helpful in telling those story to stakeholders in a way they want to hear and listen. So kind of like dashboard is a way to which that will perhaps like help us to get to the report component. And some of the modern day community forums or like the community platforms have a lot of inbuilt customizable dashboards that they have developed. And we can also perhaps like generate reports on a monthly basis, weekly basis to compare the data against a set of like cohort or controlled values, and then produce those reports to be able to communicate with CEOs, executives, and also with community members if needed. So but unfortunately not every small community would have that opportunity to have a customized dashboard. In that case, then you might have to export the data into spreadsheets and prepare kind of like the graphs that would be helpful for you to understand how the community is tracking, and then prepare reports accordingly for your stakeholders.
Yeah, great point, Silver. And yeah, I mean, even to riff off that, we use Airtable to basically build out data dashboards. It's a great tool, airtable.com. You can also sign up for a free trial, and they have a lot of data dashboards where you can input kind of like glorified spreadsheets that will then calculate it into a nice dashboard for you. And then I will write my monthly report based on that dashboard and send that to our advisors on the 7th day of every month to make sure that we as a business are keeping on track of our metrics, and then not basically letting the wheels fall off. But Jess, did you want to add anything around how you think about dashboards from that perspective before we move on?
Sure. I added something into the chat for Venia for your review, but we have a rhythm and we snap to the business's wider rhythm with reporting. But I think the most important thing is the analysis and what you do with that information. Because it's all well and good to spend all of your time building dashboards and spreadsheets, but that should be as simple and as automated as possible so you can focus your time on what matters, which is the analysis and the storytelling and the action that comes afterwards.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we've got so many questions. We're not going to have time to get to them all, but we'll do 2 last questions here from Brad and Ron. And Hawk, I might ask you this one from Ron, which is all about, have you ever been in a challenging situation where something the business wants to do and implement would actually hurt the community and actually detract from the member experience, but you don't have enough data or proof to actually persuade the business that they shouldn't continue, possibly drawing on other existing adjacent metrics? So yeah, I think the crux of this question is, what do you do to build a business case if you kind of want to protect the community? Hawk, what are your thoughts?
It's going to depend on the situation. Yes, I have been in this situation. In the example I can think of, it was about whether we start serving ads to an existing community. I, with my community manager's hat on at the time, was pretty sure that it wasn't a great option for my community members. However, it was clearly a great option as a new revenue stream for the business. As it turns out, I had no choice. I sucked it up, and it was absolutely fine. So I do think that sometimes there are justifiable business cases that create friction for us, because community professionals, our number one job is to look after the experience for people. If they can prove a business case and therefore want to implement this new project, then I guess there's the metrics you start to work from. But a lot of this is really a losing battle. I think you need to have those relationships with the stakeholders that are making these decisions, and have lines of communication that are strong enough that you can make sure. I mean, ultimately, the issue you're dealing with here is sadly a lack of either respect or understanding of your professional stance, that you are, as a community manager, the person that is responsible for this part of the business, and you are the person that knows how these people think and work. And if your business is going to railroad you for reasons, then that's your issue, really, not the community program they're trying to put in. I know that's possibly not what you wanted to hear.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I've also been in this situation. I worked at a company that wanted to build in a new community portal, but all the emails that would go out to our thousands of members had a no unsubscribe button. And I was like, I really don't think this is going to be a good idea. We're going to be bothering all these alumni. And I put together a business case, and we lost the business case. But one thing that was really helpful, I said, okay, well, if we do this, can we have a trial period where we go, great, we'll implement it for a month. At the end of the month, we're looking for X results as success. But if we hit Y, which indicates it's actually a hindrance, can we then check in and then check? And we checked in after a month. It was not good, and we ended up cutting it. So also think about that trial period as well.
Yeah, good advice.
Love that. All right, we're going to actually have to wrap the audience Q&A because I want to make sure everyone gets out on time. But Brad, we'll send up a follow-up for your question, and hopefully write up an article of a lot of the key takeaways for this as well. But panelists, I want to do a rapid fire round and end on your advice before we close today. And so Hawk, then Jess, then Selva, I'd love to hear, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received about measuring community ROI? Let's wrap it.
Cool. This is not advice I've received, but it is the advice I would like to pass on. And that is that no community is the same. And as such, there is no single set of metrics for calculating your return. I can't bang on about that enough. I get asked weekly for benchmark figures and KPI sets, but these are just generic terms, and asking them implies that you don't really have a deep understanding of the construct. There is no such thing as a standard data set, because you're comparing apples to kiwi fruits. So you must have that clear understanding of your business goal and start from there. Don't ask for generic numbers or benchmark figures or ROI stats. This is an individual project that's not one size fits all.
Love it. 30 seconds, Jess. What do we got?
I believe not everything that you track should be reported. So pick your one, maybe two big headline, up in lights insights. Tell great stories about them. Track plenty, monitor plenty, but curate what you report based on your audience.
Love it. All right, a couple sentences sent to Selva. Bring us home.
Cool. Going last here, so I need to borrow some words from Hawk and Jess, but I'll try to phrase it in a way that I have heard. So I've generally heard from several community builders that they face the daunting task of being able to define the ROI of the community and not being able to have the buy-in internally from their team members. So one key piece of advice I would give is being able to identify the value proposition of the community, and that could be helping in shaping the community ROI as well as the business goals. And again, ROI for different communities work differently, and it is essential to have that understanding.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Huge round of applause for our panelists. Hawk, Jess, Selva, thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your words of wisdom. It's an absolute joy to be with you all live. And as well, we'll put all of your LinkedIn and company details in the chat. So everyone here, please connect with them, share the one highlight that you learned from today, and be sure to check out everything that they're building because they are fabulous humans. And who else are fabulous humans? We're going to wrap. We've got a minute. Hang on. If you've got to leave bang on time, you can totally do it. If you want to spare a couple minutes, you can stay with us live. But I just want to say a massive thank you again for everyone here joining us in the Buttery land and as well in the future watching this recording. What a legend you are. And as well, thank you to Jem from our team being the absolute tech master wizard in the chat. Woo, found those so many resources. And as well, thank you so much for Discourse and the team, May, Hawk, Sam, Andre, and everyone else across all those different countries for supporting this event and bringing it to life with us. If you do need an online home for your community, please check out Discourse or shoot me a message and I can chat more about it as well. And as well, let's wrap with our closing. So we believe that feedback is a gift and we want to give you a gift. So if you submit the feedback form, you'll get instant access to a free community guidelines template that will help you manage really safe and supportive communities. And as well, let us know what you thought. We are dedicated to continuous improvement. They are our metrics as well in the form. And of course, stay connected to us. You'll get a follow-up email with all of the links, and we'll check out the prizes for the social media shares with tagging the Community Collective in Discourse. And as well, that community guidelines template is the gift that you will receive upon submission of the form. So thank you everyone again for coming. It's been an absolute pleasure. This is the template that you'll get access to, but we're going to leave you with all these words of wisdom. Remember what's important to the value of the business, the members, and your community, and just keep having fun. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll see you all very soon. Bye.